Welcome to this training on placement and follow-up services. My name is Evie Wold, and I work in placement services for vocational rehab services. I'm located in southern Minnesota, and I work a lot in that area as well as statewide. And I'm joined by Fern.
My name is Fern Johnson. I'm a placement coordinator for Northwest Minnesota.
And I'm getting the slide. There we go. All right, so today we're going to talk about the placement and follow-up services process. Our objectives today are to define that process, to look at the delivery differences between VRS placement coordinators and our community providers, to know the importance of those pre-job search activities, which we'll talk about, understand the key components of the placement process, understand the conditions for a closure, and the fun paperwork that we all know and love. All right, so prior to viewing this webinar, you may want to pause right now to open the following documents, either printing them or having them on your desktop. They'll be handy to have available during this training. And notice that this PowerPoint has some embedded links that you can access. This PowerPoint will be available and accompanying the webinar that you're viewing right now as well. So you can get to those links through that PowerPoint. All right, so starting out with placement services, who provides those services? The process by which our job seekers find employment is through the placement and follow-up services process. Oftentimes, Voc Rehab Services will contract with their community partners and engage in a contract to pay for those placement services, and that's called a performance-based agreement, or a PBA. Sometimes VRS will utilize internal placement coordinators if there's an unmet need for placement services in a certain area. When we use PBAs for our community partners, we pay for those services using milestones. Milestones are only relevant to our providers since we pay our providers for those services. But you'll hear that milestone word a lot. So we'll be going into exactly what those milestones are for our providers so you're familiar with them. All right. The placement process has two structures. We have the general and the E1 placement processes. And the general process is for job seekers who are not on a waiver, a Medicaid waiver. The E1 process is for all those job seekers on an E1 waiver. So typically, VRS will utilize our community partners when we have job seekers who are in that E1 structure. A lot of times they may need more job coaching, they may need more supports, and our providers a lot of times have those supports there for them. So, but sometimes they will use our internal placement professionals for that process. So we'll be going over both processes today. They're similar with some distinct differences that we will highlight for you. All right, this is an overview of the entire placement and follow-up process. You'll see on the left, there's the pre-job search activities that take place before you, the placement person, even joins the team. Then we have the signed placement plan meeting where the team comes together, has the plan. We'll go into what that all means, but you can see that is PBA milestone 1. Then while the job seekers still looking for work, we convene again at 60 days. That is a 60-day check-in. Then we have the next piece of the process is the first paid day of employment. And you can see that's PBA milestone 2. We'll continue to have regular contact during that first phase of employment. And that leads us to the successful placement closure, which you can see is PBA milestone 3. So let's go more in depth now into those steps. So as I mentioned, there's a lot that happens between the counselor and the job seeker before the placement person even joins the team. The counselor will be meeting with that job seeker to look at and to discuss the placement team approach. So in placement services, we use a team, which is the counselor, the job seeker, and the placement person. There may be other people in that team, but everybody's got their work to do and responsibilities in that team. So the counselor will review and discuss that. They'll be talking about those roles of each person in the team. They'll be talking about informed choice. The job seeker has the choice of what provider they want to use, be it a VRS placement coordinator or a provider. And they're encouraged to do some interviewing, some talking with different placement professionals, because it's their choice who they use. The counselor and the job seeker will be looking at the interests and the goals of the job seeker, the skills that they have, and they'll be developing a job goal based on those skills. The counselors are also looking at labor market information to make sure that that job goal is viable in the community that they want to work in. They'll be looking at criminal backgrounds and credit reports as they relate to the job goal. Sometimes people don't know what's on their criminal background or credit report, and the counselors may help them to get a report and to understand the implications of what's on there as it relates. All right, and a continuation of the previous slide, counselors and job seekers also making sure that these main supports are in place, that transportation, housing, care arrangements, all that you can see on the screen here. Disclosure, they go pretty in depth on that disclosure piece, whether they're going to be disclosing to their employers what they have available. And another piece that's important, counselors will be verifying that the job seeker has the employment documents they need to start work. So commonly we use a social security card and an ID. We want the counselors to lay eyes on that information to be sure that when they come to placement, when they're ready to look for work, that they're ready to start work and have those documents. All right, and now Fern is going to go over the invitation piece, which is the next step in the process.
We will be going over those steps required by the placement professional joining the team, along with navigation and Workforce One. When the consumer determines, or the counselor, determines it's time for the participant to be introduced to the placement professional, an invitation to placement is completed and the placement professional is either notified by tickler or email, sometimes verbally. A Workforce One invitation to placement should contain the information that a manual referral has, such as job goal, primary and secondary disability, SSDI or SSI income, work hours, wage range, training, education, geographic availability, cultural implications, and reasonable accommodations. The counselor should be the one coordinating the initial placement plan meeting. Supporting documents, including the assessment of VR needs and sample application, is what you'll need. Both these documents should be reviewed prior to the placement meeting. The assessment of vocational rehabilitation needs is located in Workforce One under assessments, then VR needs. The assessment of VR needs may give you more information about the participant than the invitation to placement. This slide shows what an assessment of VR needs will look like. The completed sample application should be in the EDS or electronic document summary. When you have been notified of the invitation to placement or referral, either by tickler or email, you will need to add yourself to the case assignment if the counselor has not already done so. Without a case assignment, you will not have the you will not have the participant's name on your dashboard or your home screen. And then when you do the placement plan, your name will not show up under placement staff. After you have either verified or entered the placement case assignment, you will need to go into add activity. Initially, there will be two options for add activities. That is either a CE or customized employment referral or referral invite activity type. The start date that you use in add activity is the date of the placement referral. You will see by the slide, I have examples of how it would look on Workforce One. Please note that the estimated end dates and estimated hours are not mandatory fields, but they can be used to track the activity of this individual. VRS activities will be changed throughout the placement process. Next, we will discuss the signed placement plan meeting. This is milestone payment 1 for a provider with a PBA. What happens during a placement plan meeting? It is the expectation that the placement professional has reviewed any documents sent by the VRS counselor. We have also completed any necessary paperwork and made necessary entries into Workforce One prior to the meeting. This meeting should truly focus on the job seeker, their job search needs, and employment goal. It is important that everyone understands the meeting's intent and the purpose and what each person's role is during the job search process. It is the first meeting with all the core team members, job seeker, placement professional, VRS counselor, or pre-ETS rep, and sometimes the waiver case manager. The goal is by the end of the meeting that we have gone over and completed the placement plan and the placement release of information using Workforce One. During this meeting, the placement professional will start to establish a rapport with the job seeker to effectively work together and to reach the goal of employment. Before the end of the placement plan meeting, the 60-day meeting is scheduled by the counselor, and the placement coordinator has set up the initial job search meeting. When developing a placement plan on Workforce One, some of the information is pre-populated from the employment service plan, but you will need to enter the plan type, placement provider, placement staff, and plan date. In this slide, as you can see in this slide, I have chosen the general PBA or job placement as the type of placement plan that we will be completing. As you can see that there are other options: customized employment, E1 PBA, job placement, and pre-ETS work experience. Best practice is to verify with the job seeker the information that has the red asterisks, making sure that they're correct. I found at times that there may be a change from when the initial employment service plan was developed between the counselor and the job seeker. This is rare, but it may be necessary for the job counselor to do a revision on the employment service plan. After you have verified the initial information, you will go over to the job seeker's responsibility and choose between action steps, which are in a predetermined language, and or the custom steps. The custom steps can be created specifically to the job search seeker's needs. When I've gone through this process, I let the job seeker know that the action steps for them are very similar to the placement professional's action steps. This is how I show the job seeker that we work hand in hand, the job seeker and the placement professional, to reach the job goal. After you have selected by checking the boxes, the steps approved by this job seeker, save this section. Next, you will add this placement staff responsibility, which is entered the same way. The final step is adding the VRS counselor or pre-ETS representative's responsibility. This is to show the job seeker that the counselor and pre-ETS rep will continue to be involved with this process. When everyone understands their responsibilities and agrees on them, the placement plan is printed out for signatures. Members of the team, including the job seeker, the placement staff, counselor, or pre-ETS rep, and if applicable, the guardian will need to sign the plan. Everyone gets a copy of the signed plan. In this slide, it's an example of a placement plan. And if you notice, it only printed out what statements were selected by the job seeker. Remember, always remember to upload the signature page into EDS. You'll also note that the waiver case manager does not need to sign this plan. The next step is the release of information to employers, or what I like to call the placement release. The ROI to employers is used to advocate for the participant with an employer. Each statement should be explained to the job seeker that they understand the statements that they are approving. These statements may include continuing to provide information, education, and support to employers as long as the placement services are being provided to help me find a job, disclose information concerning my skills, abilities, training, work history, verbally, visually, or in writing to potential employers in order to conduct the job search activities, discuss with employers appropriate financial incentives such as the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, WOTC, on-the-job training, job tryout, or on-the-job evaluation. It also lets employer know that reasonable accommodations I may need to be considered for employment, submit my resume, cover letter, contact information, and applications to prospective employers for jobs identified on my employment plan and placement goal. And there's a section for other, and that can be very specific for the job seeker. At times, there may be employers that the job seeker does not want VRS to contact. You will be able to list those employers on the consent. You will check the boxes before the statements that the job seeker has authorized. The items that are checked are the only items that will print out on your consent form. The job seeker's signature is the only signature needed unless there is a guardian. The signed release of information should be uploaded onto EDS. Generally, it's one page. This job seeker has or can withdraw from the placement consent form at any time. If they never request the withdrawal of the consent, then the consent will stay active until the VRS case closes. After the plan is signed, you will again need to change the activity type. Now your activity type choices are closed other, hold, job search, pre-job search. Job search is generally the selection at this point. As you can see from the slide, there's examples of the Workforce One places. When you assist in a case without a placement plan, at times you may get a request to assist the counselor with a case, but you will not go through the whole placement process, and there's no invitation of placement. However, the counselor has set you up as case assignment and asked that you assist. This happens with pre-ETS students or E1MN referral when the individual, let's say your provider has a waiting list and the counselor would like the process to start. That is when generally I have used the NPS activities. On the left of the slide is a picture of the screen for adding an activity. And on the right is the list of NPS activities. Now you ask yourself, why would anybody add an activity in Workforce One if I don't have a placement plan? It is a helpful tool that records your placement activity and is a way for you to show and keep track of your work, case notes, and the participants you have touched. It's very helpful in a job training activity.
All right. So let's look at the communication expectations during this process. We would like for all placement professionals to at least attempt weekly communications with the job seekers and explain those weekly assignments that the placement person and the job seeker will be completing. And this is a minimum standard. Oftentimes we meet with job seekers more than once a week. And sometimes there's situations that come up where you can't communicate each week, but attempts should still be made. We'll be working on that resume, so we want to make sure that we're putting that resume into EDS so the counselors also have access to it and can see that progress. And timely case notes. So as you can see, there's a hyperlink to the case under the case notes that will link you to the case note categories. Case notes can't be understated. Counselors may also be looking at your case notes to follow along with the job seeker's progress. And if you have questions about the case note categories, you'll want to talk with your field operations specialist or your office tech. They may have some additional training for you under those categories. Also, you'll be consulting with the counselors throughout the process. Inevitably, things come up you want to share with the counselors. Additional support needs may come up. Anything that comes up that you would need added to that employment plan, there's always something that comes up along the way. So that communication is the key. All right, so what does the term placement mean? Don't let the name fool you. It isn't just about plunking somebody in any old job. The placement is really the process of job searching. And that job search should be customized for every single person. It depends on their skills, interests, and conditions. And during the job search phase, we commonly work with people on, you can see all the bulleted tasks that we'll be working on. Let's kind of go through those one at a time. We often will help with identifying and developing job opportunities. It may be linking them with Minnesota Works, Indeed, or other job boards. We often help, and we do help with assisting in creating and updating resumes. We know that's an ongoing process. We like to customize those resumes for every job we're applying for. We're helping with completion of employment applications. We may be doing that with the job seeker online or on paper. And we know that those online applications can also have those assessments or aptitude tests that sometimes can trip people up. So we're often helping with that. Preparing for job interviews, we may be doing mock interviews, going over behavioral interview questions. There's lots of resources for help with preparing our job seekers with those interviews. Also completing cover and thank you letters, maybe developing a template for the job seeker to use to create future letters. We want to make sure the job is a good match and work with the employers to identify and eliminate barriers. Oftentimes we'll know the business that the person is applying for, and now we've gotten to know this job seeker, and we can maybe get a feel if they're going to be a good fit, if they're going to fit into the culture of that business. So that's really helpful for our job seekers when we have that industry knowledge. All right, so we've now been job searching for 60 days. So we are going to meet for the 60-day check-in. This meeting does not happen if the person gets a job before that 60 days. We cancel that meeting right off of our schedule, and it only occurs during the job search process, and it recurs every 60 days. So let's talk about that. So at the 60-day meeting, all team members are going to meet face-to-face until that job seeker is found employment. This meeting can be done virtually if it's necessary, and it has been necessary lately. But I love the face-to-face meeting. That's the ideal. We can do it virtually. It could also be done by phone if it had to be, but obviously the more face-to-face, the better those interactions can be. At that meeting, we're going to be looking at the job seeker's progress, looking at the job goal and seeing, is that still a good job goal for that job seeker, or do we need to amend it a little bit? And importantly, I think we brainstorm together to implement some new strategies, look at what's working, what hasn't worked well, and talk about some new strategies. And then since this meeting recurs every 60 days until the person finds employment, it's nice to before the meeting concludes, to schedule the next 60-day meeting. And if the person's in an E1 placement process, the waiver case manager isn't required to be at these 60-day meetings, but the counselors will often convey any changes or pertinent information that came out of those meetings afterwards to keep them in the loop. All right, the crowd goes wild. The job seeker you're working with has found the job that they were hoping for. Now what? All right, so once the person gets that job offer, there's just a lot to consider prior to their job start. I like to, if at all possible, to meet with the person. People often are anxious about a new job, and it's nice to meet, to talk through some of those first day concerns that they may have. Also, of course, contacting the VRS counselor right away. We want to celebrate that job offer and keep them updated. We want to look at anything that we weren't anticipating for supports on the job, any uniforms, work clothes, technology, whether their transportation that they have is going to work for that employer, if they have any scheduling conflicts. And then the VRS counselor will be updating that waiver case manager if the person's on a waiver to start those authorizations for the long-term supports. That'll be so important for them in their employment. Okay.
Now let's move on to the first day of paid employment, which in a PBA, it would be milestone 2. What needs to be done when you have a job seeker starting their first day of an employment? Notify the counselor via tickler, email, in person about the employment. Ensure the initial supports are put in place. Every support is unique to the job seeker's success for the job. Gather all the employment information and enter a new activity type called in employment placement. Provide the minimum information as required by the red asterisks. This includes the employer's name, address 1, city, state, zip code, the occupational title using the search and validate ONET, the hourly wage, job title as used by the employer, number of hours, and start date. Please note that you may need to do a new consent with the employer depending on the needs of the participant. The next phase of the process is frequent contacts during employment. Now we are right in the follow-up process. The job is started. Now what? After employment, job placement is secured, the placement professional starts the follow-up services. The individual and or the employer should be contacted every 2 weeks on or off the job site using the agreed upon mode of communication. This aids to confirm ongoing success of employment, to ensure that essential performance standards are being met, and the opportunity to offer and you have the opportunity to offer assistance and resources to facilitate the adjustment to the new position. Some participants may not want you to contact the employer. If that is the case, you should respect those requests. When bi-weekly contacts are made, each contact needs to be case noted whether or not the individual responds to you. This shows that you have attempted to contact them. I personally put in every contact I make. It is important that during your bi-weekly follow-ups, a placement professional watches out for changes in supervisor, natural supports or work culture, job satisfaction, transportation, hours, housing, childcare, making sure wage reporting to Social Security or any other changes at work or even at home that would affect the individual's ability to maintain employment. Additional supportive services may be needed that were not anticipated at the start date. For example, you may find that a job coach needs to be brought in and they may need assistive technology and so on. If there is a job coach, they should provide an updated report to the VRS counselor weekly. Make a Workforce One case note and communicate changes to the counselor. Follow-up services continue until a successful 90-day closure from placement. Now that the person has been employed for 90 days, we will talk about successful placement closures. Closure from placement and follow-up services. Closure considerations has an embedded link for the placement services closure conditions on SharePoint, but they usually include that the position matches the job goal, they're paid at least minimum wage, or the customary rate and benefit level, number of hours per week is adequate, job is in a competitive integrated setting, ongoing supports match needs, 90 days of employment with the same employer and position, unless the individual has made an informed decision for successive temporary assignments. How can you tell if the job seeker has been successfully employed for 90 days? One way I can tell is I go in, when I put in the activity to employment and placement, the Workforce One is tracking the number of days the participant has been in the activity. You will find those number of days on your Workforce One dashboard under the column called Last Open Activity Assigned to You, or you may have set up a tickler to remind you when the 90 days are up. And of course, you've been communicating with them every 2 weeks. Next slide. For the Workforce One closure process for 90 days of successful employment, you change the activity to closed employment. You verify all employment information, make sure it's remained the same, or make any of the necessary changes. For me, most changes in this activity have been due to an increase of hourly wage. It's time to celebrate.
All right, so that is a broad overview of the placement process for VRS placement coordinators. Fern and my emails are both on the screen. We're high-fiving that we got to the end of it with you, and you maybe as well. But please reach out to either one of us if you have questions. Fern is great at Workforce One when it relates to placement, and any other questions about the placement process, either one of us can be contacted. So we appreciate your time today and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.